Hi there, this is Andrew Brody with Yokogawa's Network Solutions Group, and today I'd like to talk to you about the MVAdvanced Data Acquisition System. It's a nice portable acquisition system that can handle up to 48 channels of universal inputs, which means thermocouples, RTDs, DC voltages, current with shunt resistors, digital inputs, level or contact are all supported. And what we see here on the screen is the default screen that will show the first time you boot up this system coming from the factory. And particularly, we're taking a look at the MVAdvanced 2000 here, which is about a 10-inch screen on it. So let's take a look at this screen quickly. And what we'll see up here in the top left-hand corner is the group name. A group is essentially a set of points, and you can define up to 10 points per group with multiple groups supported on the unit. This group 1 is just the default name. You can change that to something more specific to your application. We also see the date and time on the unit. We'll see over here where it says stop in red, that's if the unit's not recording. You'll see stop. If it is recording, you'll see green here. To start recording, you simply press the start button on it. Over here, we're going to see what type of data file we're recording. In this case, it's an event data file. An event data file is essentially a simple data file that will record samples of all your points at a specific interval. So, for example, if you had all 48 points set to sample every second, you'd get 48 samples every second with one sample for each point. If it's a display file, this is kind of a throwback to the paper recorders, where essentially the pen would drag up and down on the piece of paper every sample period. So if it was sampling on the paper, say every second or something like that, you might see the pen drag up and down, which is going to give you a max and a min. So there's going to be 2 points for every sample, a max and a min for each data point that's recorded. So event is just going to give you a single data point every sample, and a display file is going to give you a max and min. Over here we can see about how long the data file is going to be. So in this case, we've got an event data file that's going to be 1 hour. As it's filling up the file, you'll see a progress bar go across here. So here it's showing no progress. We haven't started any file. Over here, we have our icon for our media. So in this case, a compact flash of up to 2 gigabytes is supported. Do not put a card of greater than 2 gigabytes in here, or you'll get unpredictable results. And over here, if we're up and running, we'll see various things like, say we have the math option installed, you'll see a little math icon symbol here if math is running. Alright, you'll even see stuff like if you got your door open and you're ejecting your media, it'll see an icon there. If the system's in the process of writing to the compact flash, you'll see kind of this icon change a bit, like data's going into the compact flash. Do not remove the compact flash during that specific time. Over here we see the scale. Over here is essentially your trend grid, and these grids are set at so many samples per division, or minutes per division sometimes by default. Down here you'll see your values shown in a digital format along with your channel numbers. You can change these to channel names if you want later on. So I'm going to get quickly configuring this. The nice thing about the MVAdvanced is it's got a time per division button on the front. If you just hit that quickly, it'll pop up here, and it'll essentially allow you to quickly change how fast your trend is showing it on the screen. Essentially, the lower the time per division, the quicker the trend's going to scroll by. The higher the time per division, essentially you're going to get to see a much longer data log on the screen, but it's going to appear to update slower on the trend. Down at the bottom, you're going to see kind of little blue buttons and a gray button show up. Right underneath that on your MVAdvanced, you're going to have function keys that kind of match up with those. It's not a touchscreen unit, so you got to use the little function keys underneath it to pick. Say you wanted to change to 30 seconds per division. You'd hit the function key under 30 seconds per division. You hit that time per division again, you can kind of see I've got 30 seconds per division. If I want to put it back to my 1 minute per division default, I can go ahead and hit the key under the 1 minute. Alright? So now I've got it back to 1 minute per division. Nice thing also about the MVAdvanced is it's got a very quick way of setting up your channels straight out of the box. If I go ahead and hit the menu key while it's not recording, it's going to pop up the first level menu here. And what we're going to see is that there's going to be Quick, Menu, and File. Now if we go over to Quick, this essentially is a very fast way to go through and just set up your channels and your event data and get recording right away. So let's follow through on this. So time per division, I'm going to hit the time per division button. And essentially this is going to take me straight to my measurement channels. And what I can do here is I can set up a single point of channel at a time, or I could set up a whole bulk range of channels at the time. You can see down at the bottom I've got the +1, -1. I can use this to increment what the first channel I'm going to start at configuring and the last channel. If my first channel is equal to the last channel, I'm just going to be configuring that channel. If I set them to say something like this, I'm going to use the right arrow key on my display enter key to kind of cycle from first channel to last channel. And then I'm going to hit the key under the +1 a few times. So now I'm going channels 1 through 10. I can now go ahead and configure these as, if I go down to mode here, I can go ahead and hit display enter on that. And what we'll see is I can go ahead and do volts for that if I want. Thermocouples, RTDs, scale, delta, digital input, DI, log, 1 to 5 volts, square root. So in this case, I could just do something as simple as a thermocouple. I can then, under range, pick the type of thermocouple. If I hit the next key, you can see we have more thermocouple choices, and I'm going to pick type T. And what it's going to do is it's automatically going to kind of put in a range for a type T thermocouple. In this case, -200 to 400 degrees Celsius. I'll show you later on where you can change from degrees Celsius to degrees Fahrenheit. But if I go ahead and hit enter here, we're going to see the yellow background change to white. That means the change has been accepted. Whenever you make a change, make sure you hit the display enter key to accept the change. So there, I've gone ahead and set channels 1 to 10 as type T thermocouples. If I want to go down and set an alarm for a channel, I just go down to the bottom here with my arrow key. I go ahead, turn it on, and there I go. I've got essentially 6 different types of alarms. High, low, those are pretty standard. If you go above the value, you'll get a high alarm. If you go below the value, you'll get a low alarm. Rate high, rate low, you can set this, but essentially the way that works is you're going to have a certain amount of samples that happen, and if your value goes above whatever you've set it to in that amount of samples, you're going to get a rate alarm, so high or low. Okay, and the other one here, big T, little t, those are time delay high, time delay low. So you can essentially set your time delay for each channel, and then essentially if it's above that value for a certain amount of time, then it'll do an alarm. This helps eliminate, say, quick alarms from maybe just opening a door and then closing a door, where maybe your temperature will fluctuate a little bit during that door open and close. So time delay high and low are used quite a bit for just kind of smoothing out quick changes that you don't really want to trigger an alarm with. So we can go over to value, hit the input button, put in whatever value we wanted here. So I just hit the arrow key to go over there, and I could go 70. And then under relays, you've got a couple choices here. You can go on, and then if you've purchased your unit with the alarm relay option, which puts physical relays on the back of the unit for like doing horns or lights or stuff like that, those are going to be designated by I1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These will show up if you don't have the hardwired relays on the back. So just make sure that if you take a look at your data plate in your suffix code, you'll see stuff like A1 or A2 or A3 or something like that. That would designate that you bought your units with the actual alarms. Okay, so this is where you can essentially pick which relay you want to go. 1 through 6, I think you can have somewhere 12, 24 on this unit. Alright, if I hit the next button a few times, we're going to see something else that's kind of neat on this guy. These are called switches. We got S1 through 30. And what these switches allow you to do is think of these as internal memory bits. So switch 1 is just a bit that would be turned on should you go into alarm. You can then use those bits within your math channel. So if you wanted to come up with some complex logic inside your math or virtual channels on this unit, you could use the syntax S01 or S07 right inside your math channel. Okay? You can also use these switches to trigger events and actions that can do stuff like take a snapshot of the screen. Alright, and I'll show you the event action area later on in this presentation. So let's hit enter here to accept the change, and let's escape out of there. And the next thing they say is hit your time per division. So let's go ahead and hit the time per division, hit it again, and this is where we can actually set our sample rate here. Okay, you can see it's currently set to 1 second, but down at the bottom I've got more choices. I've got all the way from 1 second to 10 minutes. If I hit that next button over there, we can see my different choices. So if I wanted a sample every 10 seconds, I just pick the button under the 10 seconds. Essentially, most people will leave theirs in free, but say you just wanted a single 1 hour file, you could go ahead and go single. Or repeat, that would create multiple 1 hour files. Free is kind of similar to repeat, and that'll just create 1 hour files until you finish off. So if I wanted to do something like repeat, I could pick repeat, how big I want the actual file. I could say, see how it says pre-trigger here? This would actually be if I had a trigger that started the data logging. Essentially the pre-trigger would be how much I wanted before the trigger happened, and then of course the remainder would be after the trigger happened. So in this case, if I were to set it to something like 50%, I'd get a 1 hour file around the trigger event with 30 minutes before the trigger and 30 minutes after. Okay? And then down here, the trigger signal could be something as simple as pressing a key, or I've got other things that I could do to actually trigger this. Okay? So I could just have it like this and then have something else trigger it, or I could go ahead and hit on and that would trigger it. Okay? And then essentially what we can do here is, if I'm just following the screen here, it says time per division. So we've set up our channels, time per division, we've set up our event data, time per division, we're back to this. And now I can just hit end if I wanted to save all this. Or in this case, I'm just going to hit the escape to back out as well. Alright, so pretty much this is where we are. We're set up. We've got 10 channels across here. You can see about only one of these really makes sense, and that's potentially channel number 1. I've got a thermocouple hooked up to that. The rest are just kind of floating signals because I don't have anything attached to them. Alright, but let's get a little deeper into the actual setup of this system. So if I go ahead and hit the menu key and come to this menu here, if I didn't want to kind of use the quick setup, I could actually just go down here to measurement channel, go in here, hit range alarm, go ahead and set up all my points. Go down to tag memory sample. I could go ahead and put in specific names and stuff like that. Down here under memory sample, I can say whether I actually want to store that specific point to memory. Alarm delay, that's where I could essentially set up exactly how long I'm going to wait if I have a time delay alarm before I actually go into alarm. Okay, I can do moving averages to knock out maybe some spikes in the data recording. I can pick the color of a point. I can set stuff like what zone, essentially where it's going to be on the screen for that particular trend. My scale position. Yeah, I can also set my bar graph and so on, some of the things there. Alright. If I want alarm marks or color scale band, if I'm going to do calibration correction on this unit, that's if I have the calibration correction CC1 option in my suffix code on my data plate. Here's the math channels here. We can go ahead, calculation expression, if you have the math option, which is the /M1 or Mary1 option in your suffix code. This gives me essentially a bunch of virtual channels where I can do averaging, where I can do some if-then-else statements, where I can add channels, subtract channels, essentially just about anything you could do in math. I can chain math channels together for where I feed one math channel into the next math channel for complex equations. So I can go on here, turn it on. It's going to go into where I put in my calculation expression. I can hit my input button down in the bottom left. And then essentially I can just go something like 0, 1, and then if I take a look at say what keys I need to press, I'm going to press the 3 key here, plus, and then I could do something like 02. Okay, and essentially what that statement would be doing is add input channel plus input channel 1 plus input channel 2. Okay, so that's just a very simple, I'm adding two of my input channels together. Or say I wanted to do a difference, I could just subtract the two input channels, alright? If you want to actually subtract a constant or subtract some fixed value other than an input channel, then you have to refer to those as the math constants, and those are set up on another screen. And then you just go 0, 1 plus K1, alright? And that would take input channel 1 and add a constant K1 to it, and K1 is set up on another screen. Down at the bottom, this is just for setting kind of your upper and lower limits on your trends. Right now it's minus 200 to 200 plus, and then you've also got unit here, so that just kind of sets your upper and lower boundaries on your trends. And just like your other channels, you can set up alarms as well for these virtual channels or math channels, okay? Then hit display enter when you're done making your changes, and then you can escape to back out. Constant, this is where you can set up your constants for use in your math channels. Okay, tag memory sample alarm delay, just like under measurement channels, is where you can set your tag name, whether you're sampling a specific point into your data log, your alarm delays. T-logs and rolling averages, this is where you can set up like 3-hour averages and stuff like that. Color, zone, scale, this is just kind of how you set up how it looks like at the screen. Mass start action, essentially you can just have it start, or you could have it reset and start. So essentially when you start your math, if you had any totals or anything like that, if you picked reset and start over in the right, then essentially it would reset your totals when it started, okay? Alright, I'm going to hit escape to back out of here. External channels, that's if you've purchased like the MC1 option with it and you're using your unit to communicate to, say, external power meters to suck in data via Modbus Ethernet from external meters. Data save, and this is kind of setting what directory you want to save it to, other things like that. Save directory, for example. File settings, if you want a header for the name of the file. This is where you can also set, hey, am I going to use the Yokogawa encrypted data file, where I've got to use the data viewer that we sell with the unit, with DAC standard, to actually view the data file? Or am I just going to do a plain text data file that I could just open with something like Excel? Alright, so down in the bottom left you can see I could pick binary or text. File header, I could also kind of say how I want my file name set up. Alright, event data, remember how we did the time per division quick startup? You know, we can also go here and change the sample rate and stuff like that. Like I could change it to 1 second, I could change it to free, and data length I could change that to 12 hours. So this is going to create a data file with samples every 1 second and for 12 hours at a time, and then it's just going to continue with another 12-hour file as soon as it's finished the first 12 hours. Hit display enter to accept that change. Okay, you can also do manual samples. Create a manual sample file, which is essentially you're just going to hit the function key and then pick manual sample while your system's running, and that'll just take a quick sample of what's going on. Okay, we've also got display here, trend bar graph LCD monitor. So this is where you can set your trend direction, whether you want it to be horizontal, vertical. You can do the same for your bar graphs. You can say how bright you want your LCD to be. So I can pick 6 here. Go ahead and hit enter and it'll make my screen a little brighter. I can set it to 4, make it a little dimmer. Backlight saver. This is a good idea if you're leaving your unit on all the time. It'll allow you to kind of extend the life of your backlight. Alright, also down here you can set some different colors and stuff like that, and your scroll times, etc. Jumping to a default screen if you want. Alright, so I'm going to escape out of there. Your history key action. Essentially you can use it for history or favorites. Favorites would just allow you to quickly shoot through different screens that you've predefined. Okay, group set trip line. This is important here. Essentially, you remember those groups of points that we talked about at the very beginning? Well, here what you can do is you can go in here, turn a group on or off, you can give it a name, and then you can essentially set what channels you want to see within that group. 1, 2, 3, say up to 10 different channels in a group. So you can set this to be input channels, typically 1 through 48. You can use this for your math channels, which might be like 101 through say 160. Or you can also set this for your external channels. Alright? And essentially you can separate individual channels with periods, or you can do span of channels. Like you could go 1-10, and that would be channels 1-10. Plus you can mix and match your periods and your dashes. Okay, if we see up in the right hand corner, we can just see that an alarm came in, which essentially means one of my temperatures went above the alarm threshold here. And so if I wanted to acknowledge that, I could just escape out of here, go ahead, hit my function key, go next, and go ahead and hit alarm acknowledge. And that'll acknowledge that particular alarm. It doesn't mean that the system's now out of alarm or anything. It just means that I've acknowledged that specific one. If we take a look at channel 2, that's the specific channel here that's gone into alarm. You can see a little red dot beside it there, showing that it's in alarm, where the other ones all have kind of green dots beside them, showing they're not in alarm. Okay, so let's go back, hit the menu key here. Okay, messages, you can insert messages into your data file, which is just little text strings that you can later search on and find. Timers, you can, let's go in here. Timers, essentially you've got different types of timers. You can do a match time, which say every midnight you want to do something, or you can do a regular timer, which is just like say every 3 hours. These timers and other things can be used to set event actions. So if we go to event, we can say, okay, timer or match time if we take a look down at the bottom. Or we can do something like switch. So switch 1, you know, when switch 1 happens, I could do something like stop my math, or reset my math, or take a snapshot of the screen, or take a manual sample, reset a timer, change to a groove, set a flag. Okay? Or if I just hit memory here, essentially what that'll do is that'll just create a new data file. Essentially it'll close out the existing data file and create a new one. So I'm not going to set up any event actions at that time, but event actions can be fairly powerful here. So I'm going to cancel out of there. Menu customize, this is nice. You can go in here and you can get rid of any menu items that you don't want the operator to see. So when it's up watching a trend, like here, and I hit the display enter key, see how this menu came up on the left hand side? I can get rid of any of these things that you don't want the operator to see. So simplify the interface. If I hit escape and hit the function key, you can get rid of any functions you don't want the operator to see as well. Okay, and that's all found under this menu customize. The next thing we're going to go, but it's kind of a mandatory thing that you're going to need to set up, is under DateTime. Okay, so if I go time settings, this is where you're going to go ahead and put in, you know, what specific time you have going on here. So, you know, I'm going to go 06:30, and I'm going to say my time is like 15:42. Okay, go ahead, hit enter. Down here, daylight savings time, I'm going to say I'm going to use it, and I'm just going to go with the default. Make sure that if your PC is using daylight savings time, that you're also using it on here. Okay, otherwise you might get some offsets in your data. Alright, and make sure also that if you're using time zones and all that, that you have the time zone set correctly on your data logger as well as your PC. Okay, so everything's set here. I'm just going to escape out of here. Okay, the last thing I'm going to cover in this top level menus is the file area. So let's go over here quick. So file, load display data, load event data. That'll essentially allows you to load data files into memory so you can go and review their historical contents. Load settings, save settings. Load settings just loads the top level menu settings, like the ones that we've so far discussed, where save settings saves all your settings, and I'm going to show you some deeper settings. Okay, so this only loads the top level settings. This saves all your settings. If you want to restore all your settings, you're going to have to go to the basic setting menu that we're going to cover next, where you can then load all your settings from that point. File list delete, that's just for kind of listing what you got on compact flash. format. That allows you to format your compact flash. So let's go back to menu here, and we're going to go to basic setting mode. A couple ways to get to basic setting mode. Essentially, you can select it here, or from this menu, you can also hold down the function key for 3 seconds. Alright, so if I hold it down for 3 seconds, this takes me into basic setting mode. Let's start over here on the environment tab. Under operating environment, this is where you can say, hey, I want to display stuff by tag name or channel number. I can pick my language, pick my temperature. This is really important. One of the first things you're going to do once you get this recorder in your hands, you're going to want to go into basic setting mode and set your temperature to C or F, because that's going to have a critical impact on your channel setups later. Alright, because if you end up setting this later after you've configured all your channels, it's going to reset all your channels. Okay, so this is a critical thing to do about as soon as you can in the configuration of the unit. Decimal point type, point or comma if you're European. Okay. Let's see some other important things here. View message input alarm. Essentially this just gives you some choices on am I alarm logging. Let's see, we can also go to security, media save batch. Okay, one of the things I like on this screen that might be good for you to take a look at here is media FIFO. Turn this on if essentially you want to continue to record even when the card fills up. If your data card fills up and this is turned on, what it's going to do is it's going to essentially erase the oldest data file and make sure you've got the latest, say, 2 gigs worth of data if it's a 2 gig card. Okay? Communication. Not too much interesting there. You can look at that in your manual if you want. Math report, if you have these options. This is where you can kind of set up some of the error handling for your math. Okay. Digits, time indicate. Okay, essentially how many decimal places, time indicate, on, off. Auxiliary, won't worry about that too much at this point. You can pick N to save those changes. Let's go quickly back up to menu here. Alright, alarm, this is how your alarms are handled. Hysteresis or deadband is over there. One of the big things to know about this is indicator and relays can be hold or non-hold. Essentially non-hold means that if it goes into alarm and goes out of alarm without any operator intervention, it's not going to hold that on your screen. Okay, the indicator is just going to go into alarm and then out of alarm as the alarm kind of progresses in and out of alarm state. Okay, if it's set to hold, it's actually going to hold the indication on the screen until somebody hits the function key and picks acknowledge. Alright, same thing for the relay. Non-hold just means the relay is going to turn on when it goes into alarm and essentially turn off when it comes out of alarm. If you set it to hold, then the operator is going to actually have to acknowledge the alarm to deactivate the relay. Alright, so let's get out of here. A to D memory. Essentially scan mode, most of you are going to have normal, scan interval. This is essentially how often you're sampling the data points. Alright, it's not how often you're recording, it's just how often we're scanning the actual measurement channels. Alright, A to D integrate, depending on what type of power you're running, what frequency, stuff like that. On your stuff that you're measuring, you can pick auto here, or say like 60 Hertz if you want to get rid of 60 Hertz noise. This is where you can pick the different types of data files. Remember, there's the display and the event data file. Or you can also pick just to use both at the same time, which is E and D. Alright, so let's escape out of here. Burnout, essentially if you're using thermocouples, stuff like that, you can set which way you want them to burn out, as well as for your junction compensation, whether you want to go external or internal. Okay. If you have the math option, you'll also get the report capability with this. This is where you can set up stuff like that. Essentially how often you want to do a report. And then the next one is what channels you want to do a report on, whether you're summing them, stuff like that. Summing is mainly in the case of stuff like flow. Alright? Time settings. This is going to be important. This is where you're actually going to put in the time zone. So Eastern Standard Time is something like -500, where if you're on the Pacific Coast, you're going to have something like, say, -800. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter there. and pretty much everything else is going to stay default. You're going to go ahead and hit enter, back out, hit escape. Communication Ethernet. This is where you can enter in an IP address of your unit. It's always good to enter an IP address of your unit, even if you're not using it right away. Make sure you write it down somewhere. This is going to be really useful in case, for example, you have some problem with your screen or something like that. You know, somebody sticks a fork through your screen and damages it. Well, if the recorder is still working otherwise, you can always come in through the Ethernet and view pages via the web interface. You can configure the unit via software, stuff like that. It's just really good to have an IP address in it, just in case you need to get into it for emergency purposes over the network. All right? And then essentially to do that, you just go down here, you put in your input, go ahead, put in whatever IP address you want. So I'm just going to put in kind of this as my default address. You're going to put in a subnet mask. This is a common subnet mask that I would use with my particular unit. And, you know, whatever default gateway you happen to have for your network. Some people won't have anything, so don't worry about it. You can just leave it as its default. In my case, I know what my default gateway is, so that's what it is. And then I can just go ahead and hit enter. So now I got my IP address configured. DNS settings, I'm not going to worry about that. If you guys have a IT guy and you want to talk to him about putting this thing on the network, then this page is going to be of interest to him. Keep alive application timeout, I'm not going to worry about that. Server, this is going to be a good page. If you're going to do automatic file transfers, you're going to want to go use here for FTP. Same thing if you want to view the web pages. SNTP, you're going to want to use that if you're doing network synchronization for your time. Okay, Modbus, if you're doing external communications, you're also going to want to use that, and then hit display enter when you're done. Okay, down to web page, this is going to be a good one here. You got two choices for your web pages, which is essentially operator and monitor. Operator allows you to kind of change screens, where monitor just kind of shows you whatever screen is currently on there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to on. Access control, I'm not going to really use any security on it. Command, yeah, I want to be able to flip through screens and stuff like that, so I'm going to go use. And that's usually the default setting that I see on most of these. So now, with your MVAdvanced on a network, you can see its screens as web pages in Internet Explorer. All right? And the way I got this guy set up, all I would now do is, once it's up and running, is I'd go to Internet Explorer and I'd type in 192.168.1.204, the IP address I've set for the unit, and then I can go ahead and see it. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of here. If you want to set up your email, you can set up this guy to send out emails. If you want to set this guy to automatically transfer files to a FTP server, you know, say a computer running Internet Information Services with the FTP option. Windows XP Pro can be set up this way. Or a third-party FTP server, like say Bulletproof FTP, you can do that. SMTP, that's where you do your network time synchronization. Modbus client, this is where you essentially set up communicating to external devices, like say our MW100 data acquisition system, or our PR300, or even another MVAdvanced. Okay, so I'm just going to escape out of here at this point. And the last thing to cover over here is your initialize. And essentially, say you're starting a brand new test up and you want to return the unit to default settings. You know, right here I could clear settings and data, and this would just kind of wipe out everything that's on it and return it to stock. Clear data only. Say I'm leaving a secure area where I've done a test and I just want to get rid of whatever data I've recorded in my system. You know, clear data would essentially get rid of anything that's stored in the internal memory. Okay, now that we're all done here, I can just hit my escape button. Do you want to store and make the new settings take effect? I go yes. So now it's gone ahead and stored all those changes. And essentially it'll go through a quick little boot up here, and we'll now see that it's come back to its original screen here. We'll see that it's now showing the correct date and time up in the top left hand corner. If I go ahead and hit my start key, we'll see that the math has started up, as have the data logging. If I hit my display enter key, we'll see that there's the menu on the side. I can say go down to overview, And this is where I can see all the points that are currently configured. If I hit my display enter key again, I can go to digital if I want to see digital. Okay. If I want to change how I'm viewing at this data, I can essentially just hit the up arrow key, all right, or down arrow key. Okay, and that just cycles me through the different ways of viewing the data. If I want to see different groups, I just hit the right arrow or the left arrow key, and that'll just cycle through the different groups I have set up on the unit. All right, so when I'm ready to stop recording, essentially I just hit the start stop button, and essentially that will close out the file. And I'm just going to pick what do you want to do. I'm going to stop memory and math. I'm going to go ahead and hit my display enter key, and away we go. It posts the compact flash there, and we're good to go. Now if I have the USB key that I want to also put my memory to, I could essentially now insert my USB key into the unit and copy those files over to the USB key for transport over to my PC, or of course I could hit the function key and then do a media eject and pop out the compact flash card as well. So anyways, that pretty much wraps up this exploration of configuring the MVAdvanced. I hope it was useful, and take care. Have a great day.